Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. We are discussing a favorite topic of mine, the Nephilim from Genesis chapter 6. The question that we're going to pose tonight is, well, are they fallen angels or not? Were there giants or not? Or something else? And to look into this question, we have author Ken Ami with us. He is a prolific writer. You can go to his Amazon page, and he's a longtime researcher, lecturer on issues pertaining to worldview, philosophies, and various sorts of religions. And so, in this capacity, he's posted thousands of articles on his website, which you can check out. He has some great stuff for us tonight, and so I'm looking forward to this. You can look at his website at truefreethinker.com, and he just has a ton of stuff there that I think will keep you reading for a very long time. So, hey, Ken, we're glad to have you with us.
I'm pleased to be with you and your audience.
Fantastic. So I just want to let people know that if you have questions for either Ken or
Able to hear
myself,
me?
please feel free to ask us, and we will do our best to get your question in the queue, and we'll take a look at that. But again, tonight we're going to take a look at Genesis chapter 6. Now, Ken, this is a fun topic because you're going along in the Bible. Everything seems fairly reasonable, except maybe a talking snake. I mean, that I believe it, but some people have some trouble with that. But then we get to this thing about Genesis chapter 6, and suddenly we're confronted with something that just doesn't feel right to some people. Okay, and so there's been a tendency in more modern times, but even starting as early as Augustine, really to throw this whole thing out, say, these what's happening in Genesis chapter 6 is just talking about people. So you've written a book on this, discussing this very topic, whether or not the Genesis chapter 6 are angels or not. So kind of tell us how you got into this and where your research took you.
Well, how I got into it, of course, is just one of these things I happen to run across. I find that happens to me a lot. If something catches my interest, I tend to have a healthy obsessive side to me. So all of a sudden, I'm diving in and I'm looking at an issue just from every conceivable angle. Things that are agreeable to me, things that are not agreeable to me, and then when I start developing my own view on it, I still consider. I would tend mostly to consider the people who are not agreeing with me, because then if I'm wrong, I'll find out about it all the sooner, and then if I'm correct, I'm able to strengthen my position. Uh, but as far as my own view goes, that's only part of this book. That's just like my little bit of commentary that I make here and there. So this was more about the history of the interpretation or commentaries upon this key portion of Genesis 6. So
Mm-hmm.
I went from roughly 250 BC all the way to the 5th century AD, pointing out everybody who I could possibly think of who had commented on it down through the years, Jews and Christians, either one, and to
Fascinating.
see what view they took. Yes.
Yeah, so kind of give us, take us sort of 250. That's basically Qumran, or even a bit earlier than
Right.
Qumran. We're
Yes.
talking about, you're probably talking about the Septuagint. Is that what you're making
Correct.
reference to?
Correct.
Okay, right. And then your ending point was about 580. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
So we've got 750 years of commentary. And for the most part, you went and you were looking at what people were saying about this era, with giving just a little bit of your own commentary, but mostly kind of showing us what people were actually thinking about this.
Right. So for every single text I could dig out from that huge time range, I mean, we're talking roughly 700 years. The book begins with a chart that is very simple. It's just the author, the text, the citation, and then whether they took the angel view or whether they took a view that I'm just referring to as miscellaneous because it could be 2 or 3 other views. So that just simplified the chart. Then the rest of the book is chapter by chapter actually showing the quotations and then the citations. So that way, if you want to just strictly know what these texts were saying about it, there it is. Just every chapter of the book is telling you from the horse's mouth. And then along the way, I just made a comment here and there where I thought it would be helpful.
Very cool. So what are those other positions? Obviously, one is the angel view, but what are some of the other views that people have had throughout the ages?
Sure. Let me tell you that. First, let me ask if you have Genesis 6 before you so we could read it in a little while. And I would only ask you to read it because I'm dyslexic, and believe me, you don't want to hear me reading out loud too much. So while I answer this, just make sure you while I answer this, maybe pull up Genesis 6, and then we could read the key portion.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I will get started here with Genesis chapter 6. It says, "Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them." Would you like me to keep going?
Great, that's great.
Okay.
And yeah, so one thing we were just talking about is how here's this little sliver of text, and all of a sudden you're confronted with, okay, now I got to deal with who are the sons of God, who are the Nephilim, who are the giants, who are the men of the round. Are they the same? Are they different characters? All of a sudden there's this ton of things that confront you from that text. So that's one of the things that makes it really fascinating. And one of the reasons it's been hotly debated for centuries now. So you had asked me about the views. So yeah, of course, one is the angel view, and there might actually be a couple of subcategories there as far as were they loyal angels? Were they fallen angels? Is an angel spirit? Does an angel have a body? You know, all those issues. And then the other view would be one very popular one is that the sons of God are the Sethites, so descendants from Seth, and the daughters of men were the Canaanites. Another view might be that this dealt with noblemen who were supposed to uphold their nobility, but they got mixed up with the common people. Another view is maybe that they were the judges, and again, they got mixed up with the common people. And then you get a lot of subcategories that go in various different directions, such as that they were just humans. Maybe they were noblemen, maybe they were judges, but that they were possessed, you know, so you end up with a lot of little side tracks there.
But if we I'm sorry. I say if we look at if we look at the corpus of material from 250 until about the time of Christ, do you see any views that actually believed in the Sethite view or any of these other minority opinions as you're discussing?
So you're setting the timeline to the time of Christ. I would say no.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that was my research as well. Is that it was a unanimous position up until the time of Christ, or shortly thereafter.
Yeah,
So
I might say that pseudo Philo, it might be the exception. Not Philo, but pseudo Philo. But other than that, yeah, go ahead.
What time frame is pseudo-Philo? I don't know when he actually wrote.
Roughly 70 AD.
70, 80. Okay.
Or wait,
okay.
hold on. I'm sorry. Yes. So I mean that is after the time of Christ, just not
okay.
that long afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so before the time, okay, so strictly speaking, let's say roughly 30 AD, at the angel be down the line, maybe with the exception of the Septuagint, only because you know how you have different
Right.
manuscripts. Um, some versions of the Septuagint will actually translate as angels of God, just totally straight up like that.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah, they don't mince any words there. They just go straight to the angel
Right.
view,
Yeah.
right? You're thinking of Job chapter 38, for example, I suppose. Is that what you're talking about? Or you're actually talking about
Well,
this
no, no, no.
particular text specifically?
Yes, 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 yes. Yes, they some versions of the Septuagint will straight up translate Genesis 6 as angels of God marrying the daughters of men.
Okay. Okay. Uh, Interesting. Okay. Um, I'm not aware of that text, so I'd love to see that. That'd be fun to see that sometime. Um, but yeah, so um, fantastic. Okay, so what's your overall conclusion? I mean, you're or tell us more about some of these texts that you've been looking at and kind of where you think the transition went from basically a unanimous angelic view. When did it transition to the Sethite view, in your opinion?
Well, as I'm leafing down the chart, I mean, it's all angel view, angel view, angel view. Then, like I said, pseudophilo is on the miscellaneous side. Then angel view, angel view, angel view. Um, and then around 130, you start having a couple on the miscellaneous side, but then right back to the angel view. A couple more on the
Hmm.
miscellaneous side, and then quite a few on the angel side. So I'll give you the breakdown right now, which is out of the 43 texts that I found,
Hmm.
28 take the angel view. Okay, 10 of them take a miscellaneous view, and 5 I just had to list as uncertain because it was
Okay.
just really, really tough to figure out if they were taking a position or if they were just saying, hey, that's what the text says, but I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
So I would say definitely um, touching upon it in the 130s, but then it's right back to it as late as the 320, 300s AD.
Hmm.
And then it seems like to, like I said, this only goes to the 5th century, but you definitely have to go after the 5th century AD to start getting a lot of them or the majority lined up on the miscellaneous side.
Do you see a transition around the time of hold on, my mind is escaping me, but of Augustine? I mean, or even Julius Africanus is the earliest that I'm aware of that took the other view. Now you're suggesting that it was actually pseudo Philo. Was he the earliest in your research that was the miscellaneous or the Sethite view versus the angelic view? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Right. I'm saying that before that, the Septuagint, it kind of depends on which manuscript you're reading.
Okay.
Okay. All right. But then definitely you're looking at pseudo Philo for the first one that's not an angel view, and that's in 70 AD.
Okay. Hmm. Interesting. But of course, he is not very well known.
No.
Did he have much? Did he have much influence, or what's your take on pseudo Philo? How significant was he?
Well, definitely far behind the actual Philo.
Right, because the
Sorry.
actual Philo takes a very specific view. I mean, he says in very simple language that Moses uses the word angels, whereas the Greeks would use the word daemonia to speak of these, ancient gods. And and of course, Josephus and all these guys are taking this same view. So this is interesting. I did not know about pseudophile. That's good to know. That's good research. That's great.
Yeah, let me. If my PDF behaves, I was trying to find the pseudophilo section. I know you've published books, and I do not actually have a physical copy of this book in my hands yet. It's supposed to come in a couple weeks.
Oh, that's great.
You know, for authors, that's a little frustrating. I don't even have my own book. Right.
That's right. Yeah, little by little, little by little.
Yeah.
Yep, that's really cool. Yeah, we got some questions coming
Sure.
in. I'm curious though, before we get to the questions, if you actually have a position, if you take a position on whether it was angels or the Sethite, or if you're just kind of, I'm just doing the research, or I'm not going to take an opinion on this. I'm not going to, take a stand. Where do you stand on that?
First, I wanted to note, I don't know if the questions are just for you as the admin to see, but I'm not seeing any on my end, just so you know.
No, yeah, they're, I mean, it's possible to see them. They're on the live chat. So
Okay.
I can send you that link, and then you can take a look at that as well.
Okay, and then just pick and
But
choose.
I can also relay the
Yes,
questions.
that would be great. Okay, so
yeah.
I definitely have a view, and the reason I was explaining the way I laid out the book is because, yes, I do state I put the quotations out there exactly as is, so everybody can read what was said unbiasedly. But then I definitely insert my own view into how I examine, or how I dissect or discern what all these authors are trying to tell us. Because obviously, some of them are taking a view and they're sort of betraying that they're making errors along the way. So I have no problem pointing out those things. My view is definitely the angel view.
Okay.
And yeah, we could take that in any direction you want. Like I said, there's so many little side branches to discuss off of this.
So as you've been going through the research, and so obviously you hold the angel view, but you start seeing this other view pop up. Any thoughts as to why they started going in that direction? What was their motive for going from what seems to me a very clear interpretation to a much more allegorical, unclear interpretation?
I'll grant you that that's an excellent question, and unfortunately, I don't think I have a good answer. It's really just hard to say why one view began to be popularized, and to the point where, yeah, really in our modern day, this is almost like a very esoteric subject altogether, much less to actually take the angel position on it. But I do come to find that that is because there are an enormous numbers of misunderstandings about so many issues related to this, and a lot of it based on quote unquote common knowledge, which to me is things that everybody knows, even though nobody knows how anybody knows. Okay, but they're just these gigantic assumptions, and so then you're confronted with this position, and it's like, well, based on my assumption, that doesn't work. Next. I'm not saying everybody dismisses it quite like that, but I do find that this area of research is really saturated in misinformation in every conceivable direction. It's really frustrating at times.
Now, when you say every conceivable direction, I mean clearly there's the Sethite. There's no such thing as fallen angels mingling with women. So obviously there's that position, but then there's the other extreme, which I'm probably more on this side, but I hope I'm not too far. What have you discovered that people on this side, the people that take the pro-angelic side, where could they go too far?
Okay, to lay it all out, and I'll give you as much detail as you want. Okay, I'll just lay out my view really quick. These are angels who, through this process, fell. I believe that Jude and Second Peter speak of this quite explicitly, and that they left their first estate. This is why when Jesus talked about marriage in the hereafter, he said that we will not be getting married because we will be like The angels of God in heaven. He didn't just say angels. He was very specific that the angels who do not get married are the loyal angels.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the ones who left their first estate. They're God's angels in heaven. Those are the ones who do not get married. I don't take that as a blanket statement because of what Jude and Peter explain. They left their first estate. There's a correlation between the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah after going after strange flesh and the sin of these angels. And by the way, if Jude and 2 Peter are not talking about Genesis 6, that's fine with me. Tell me what they are talking about, because I can't find in Scripture absolutely anywhere else where there could have been a fall of angels mentioned that then Jude and Peter would have referred to.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them do that. So my view is that, and here's where, okay, one thing I should tell the audience, because we discussed this in private, is I tend to find myself falling in the middle of the view that completely denies that it was angels and it was just a human affair, and the view that it was angels but can go to the extreme. Okay, from middle to extreme. I'm not saying everybody goes extreme, but I'm right in the middle, and this is partly why. I see this entire scenario taking place pre-flood, and then there's a giant period after it. Done. Okay, so the angels fall, they mate with women. Their punishment is to get incarcerated. And no angel ever falls again. No angel ever does any of this again. All the Nephilim are drowned in the flood, never to be heard of again. And the Bible knows absolutely nothing of any sort of concept of the return of the Nephilim or anything like that. There's absolute silence. So to me, it's the whole entire thing is over and done with by the time of the flood.
What would you do with Numbers 13:33, where it says that the sons of the Anakim were also Nephilim?
See, what I would ask is, you said it says. Now my question is, who said?
Well, the spies that came back, they said it's a great land, but
Right.
there's giants, and we saw the Bnei Anak, which are from the Nephilim. So
Right. I think that's extremely important because that contextualizes for us the one and only place outside of Genesis 6 where the Nephilim are actually referred to by name is within the mouths of spies who are said to have brought what? A bad report.
Okay.
Let's start there. Now, I will grant that the actual text is about how God told them to conquer the land. The spies come back and they dissuade the people from doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the primary reason why their report was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the subtext in my mind is that when you read Numbers 13, the way it plays out is the spies come back, they dissuade the people from doing what God commanded. Caleb jumps in to encourage them.
Mm-hmm.
And only then do the spies point out that they saw the Anakim who come from the Nephilim. It's only at that point. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, it's almost like a scare tactic. Like, okay, we got you nice and worried about entering the land. Here comes Caleb to encourage you to do it. Let's take it up a notch. Okay. Let's throw in this bit of, a scare tactic. The strongest argument in my mind as to why I read the subtext that way is because later on in his life, Caleb relates that event in Joshua 14. Mm-hmm. And he affirms that the Anakim were in the land, but he says nothing about the Nephilim. Okay, then in Deuteronomy 1, Moses relates that same story. He affirms the Anakim in the land, but he says nothing about the Nephilim. And then in Numbers 14, God himself affirms that the Anakim were in the land, but he says nothing about the Nephilim.
But aren't Anakim and Nephilim exactly the same thing? I mean, you have kind of a scenario in Deuteronomy chapter 3 where we're told that you have you got King Og of Bashan. He was obviously a pretty big guy, and then we have these
Well,
different names for these creatures. No?
that to me is a complex issue that we would have to treat in great detail. Even saying, I don't want to sidetrack into this right now, although we can in a moment.
Sure, that's fine.
I would even challenge the claim that Og was large, physically large, because we don't know that.
It says that
But
his bedstead, but okay, you don't take that as being he was big.
yeah,
I'm just curious how you read that. That's all.
yeah, it's just a simple fact of the text that we're told how big his bed is. We're not told about his personal height.
Okay.
You have kids. Haven't you ever slept with an infant? You know how much room they take up?
Well, I've never been in a 15-foot bed.
Yeah.
So
no, my point isn't
no.
even. I'm not even claiming that Og was not a tall human being or a.
Okay.
I'm just saying the text doesn't tell us.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing out that simple fact.
Well,
We have
we're told that they're tall, right? Because in Deuteronomy 2:10
well,
it says a meme had dwelt there in times past, a people as great and numerous as tall as the Anakim, and the word Anak means giant. So you already have something there that would suggest that
well,
you have these big people, no?
okay, let's slow down a minute. Let me take a step back. So this is part of what we were talking about is you're led into all these fascinating areas because they're all kind of piled together on top of each other in Genesis. So it's fascinating. I mean, this is really just enjoyable getting into the text and going all over the place because that's where Genesis has so much to say. Now, back to Numbers 13, there is that interesting claim in there that they saw the Anakim. They didn't even say they saw the Nephilim. They said they saw the Anakim, and the Anakim come from the Nephilim.
Okay.
That's what the spies said. Okay, so going back to that.
Okay.
The Anakim are named after Anak, and Anak is the son of Arba.
Okay.
Beyond that, frankly, I don't know if we have any more genealogy beyond that. I have not been able to find anything. So unfortunately, that's as far back as I can take you as far as genealogy. Then I would point out, if you want to get into the issue of giants, I'm not even convinced that the word giant belongs in an English Bible.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay.
All right.
Because I know you know very well because of your expertise in Hebrew. You know there's many different Hebrew words that are translated for us as giant. Right. And that to me causes a big, big problem and a mess because it is various different words. Anakim, Rephaim, you name it. I mean, and so then we need to talk about, well, what is a giant? Okay, to me, it's just a generic term, and it only means taller than the average, unless a certain height is specified. Okay, so taller than the average Hebrew of those days, males were 5'5". All right, so a giant is somebody taller than 5'5". And unless we're specifically told how much taller, we just don't know. Then I would point out that the term Anakim or Anak actually means long neck, which frankly I find it fascinating, by the way, that Anak, even these millennia later and in so many different languages from Hebrew to English, Anak still essentially means a neck.
Interesting.
I find that fascinating. But
And it coming from the Anunnaki, is that where you're deriving this word from Sumerian? Is that
not necessarily?
No? Okay.
I'm just saying that it's interesting that the Hebrew term Anak still means a neck, although, albeit it implies that it's a long neck.
Okay.
So if that made them a few inches taller or a few feet taller, I don't know. That's my point. The text does not tell us.
Now, how tall do you think Goliath was? Do you think he was just
You know,
6 foot something, or was he taller than that?
from what I recall, he is taller in Greek than he is in Hebrew.
Okay.
I could dig up my research on that, which I have done, but
Right.
yeah, sadly there is a distinction between the Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls, and then your basic Masoretic text. And his height would range between 6 and 9 feet
Mhm.
when you just put all those together. And I'm basing it on roughly an 18 and a half inch cubit,
Okay.
which I think is the standard. Incidentally, to me, I know that there were different cubits,
Yeah.
but I think the one the Hebrews generally used, to me, they were very practical. Okay, so here's my literal span.
Hmm.
In the Bible, a span is like this: tip of your pinky to tip of your thumb, roughly 9 inches, and two spans is making up my cubit. So that to me makes a lot of sense. They were just practical. A guy measuring something wanted to stick his arm out and say, I'm done. I don't have to do all these calculations to whatever cubit the Egyptians were using or whatever else.
That's fun. I mean, I would probably disagree with you because I argue that it's an Egyptian royal cubit. It makes sense to me that Moses coming out of Egypt, I mean, all the children of Israel coming out of Egypt are going to use the Egyptian royal cubit. And I've actually been to the British Museum and I've gotten to see the Egyptian royal cubit. It's pretty cool. It's 20.63 inches. So it's a very definite measure. And we even see that there is a royal cubit and then there's a standard cubit throughout the Bible. Ezekiel uses the royal cubit for some of his measurements concerning the temple. Goliath was said to be 6 cubits tall, which would put him about 10 feet tall, essentially.
Then
If it's
also,
20 inches.
sorry. See, this is
No,
why I love discussing this stuff, because it is important to hear any side of this view and consider it. And I was just going to point out in Revelation, you also have a measurement of the temple, and it makes a statement to the effect of that it's an cubit of an angel, essentially.
mm-hmm.
I forget the word by word quotation from Revelation, but that's what it points out. And that can easily bring us back to to what are angels? You know,
Sure.
I'm willing to go wherever you want. So
No,
we
that's
could talk
fun. That's fun.
because we were
Uh,
dealing with Numbers 13, and that was my
right.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Is that Caleb, Moses, and God mentioned the Anakim in the land. They do not mention anything whatsoever about the Nephilim. Even the spies mentioned the Anakim. Do not mention the Nephilim, only in that they considered the Anakim to be descendants of the Nephilim. But again, they were, in my mind, discredited. I mean, their report was bad for, like I said, a
Hmm.
primary reason and then a subtext reason.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I appreciate your research, and it's fun that we all get to share notes. Um, I'm of the persuasion that Anakim, Nephilim, Anakim, Rephaim, Emim, they're all the same thing because it even says that. Well, here they're called the Emim.
Yes.
Here the Anakim are called the Rephaim, right? And so you have these different names for them, but they're obviously the same thing. Even the Amorim, and in fact, you have in Amos 2:9, God said, yet it was I who destroyed the Amorites before them, the Amorim, whose height was like the height of the cedars. He was as strong as the oaks. So, I mean, does God exaggerate? I guess that's kind of the big question here.
Okay.
I don't know. It's like saying, I caught a fish this big, right? But does God need to do that? I don't think he does, frankly. I could be
well,
wrong, but I don't think he needs to exaggerate.
well, first of all, did you hear about the one-armed fisherman? He caught a fish this big.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so yes, we are told that these particular clans are called by very different names throughout the regions, but they are never correlated to the Nephilim unless you count Numbers 13. We're not told, we call them Nephilim, but these people call them that, these people call them the other.
Hmm.
And what I think is going on, okay, we're going back to Genesis 6, where some English translations use the term giant, but that term is not in the Hebrew, is it?
Right. No, it's not. I mean,
Okay,
It's Nephilim, yeah.
so the problem is then we're jumping ahead and we're saying we know that all these clans are really related from the Nephilim because they were giant. There's a logical break there. Why are we considering tallness to necessarily tie back to the Nephilim of Genesis 6, who are never said to be tall or giant or anything?
Okay, that's a fair point. I agree with you. They hear the word gigantes. It means earthborn. Okay, so essentially it means a demigod, right? So it would be Zeus coming down and having relations with someone, and then you have Hercules, for example. Okay, so Hercules, in that sense, not because he was tall, but because, at least according to the story, he was incredibly strong because he was a mix. All right, so I completely agree with you there. Giants does not mean that they were tall. And you know, whether I think they were tall for a while. They seem to get shorter as time goes on. But you're right. The word Nephilim doesn't have to mean tall. It's some kind of a mix. Okay. But they seem to be tall as well. So that's just kind of an interesting little thing there.
Okay, but they seem to be tall, but we're nowhere told that. You see the problem there?
Well, I disagree with that. I think we are told that they're tall. We're told that they were of great stature. That these people were, I mean, look, it says the descendants of Anak came from the giants or from the Nephilim. We were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. So, and it even says that these were men of great stature. So, I don't think frankly, I don't think that I don't think that the spies were guilty of exaggerating or, telling a false story. I think they were guilty of not believing God, who even told them, "Don't worry, I will be with you when you come to the Amorites. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of these guys." Right? So that's what I think they were guilty of, not of the exaggeration and we saw a bunch of really tall people, forget it. No, I think they were just not believing.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I made sure to point out the main text is definitely about them dissuading the people from doing what God commanded. That's not a question in my mind for sure. But where are you saying that we're told Nephilim were of tall stature? Where it says mighty men of old, men of renown, or what?
No, I mean right there in Numbers chapter 13.
Oh, okay.
It says, and all the people whom we saw in it were men of great stature. So right there you have already that we're told that these guys are really tall.
Right.
We're also
what
told
guy?
that
The Anakim.
Sure. I mean, it says it's a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. So, I mean, I don't think we need to discount that. I think, what it's saying what it was.
Yeah. Let me just reiterate something.
Sure.
I'm not even denying that they were very tall people.
Yeah.
That is a non-issue for me. My only issue is to be absolutely precise about what a text is and is not telling us. Like about Og, we can claim that it's a logical conclusion that he was very tall. I don't have a problem with that. But as long as we keep in mind and remind ourselves we are not actually told that about him physically. That's the kind of thing I'm getting at. Is not necessarily denying it, but making sure that when we make that claim, we actually have a solid basis. So, for example, they were as tall as cedars, right?
Sure. Okay.
So apparently, we should be able to measure an average cedar from the Middle East, and we would know how tall they are. But then they're as strong as oaks. So, what kind of ratio can you provide me for determining how strong a person is based on how strong an oak is? You see what I mean?
Well, they're pretty tall. I mean, pretty strong, right? I mean, they're both. You have this. It's not a.
So,
but we know how tall a cedar is. 40 feet is pretty standard. So
it's just a question in my mind: are we being told that you can conduct calculations based on likening people to cedars and oaks? Or are we to conclude that we're being told that these people they meant business, they were strong, they were big, they were, a sight to behold, even though I might not know how tall they were?
Sure. Again, I don't want to beat this thing because, how exactly tall they were is, probably a little bit
Sure, sure. No,
uncertain. But it's interesting because when you go to Job chapter 40 and it talks about, God is talking about the behemoth, it says that, where were you when I created the behemoth? And it says it moves his tail like a cedar.
like a sea.
Okay,
Yeah,
and it's just interesting because paleontologists have now dug up the sauropod dinosaur, the Diplodocus to be exact, and it had a tail that measured 46 feet. All right, and that is very consistent with what a cedar tree is. So I don't think it's outlandish. I mean, it'd be really fun if we could actually find these bones, but we haven't, as far as I know, except for some crazy weird stuff on the internet. But those fake pictures. I got
oh
people.
yeah,
People
oh
were sending me these photos. Doug, look, they found the bones. I'm
yeah,
like, no, they didn't find the bones. But there have been reports. So, I mean, I don't think this is the biggest issue. I mean, how tall exactly they were, but I think they were tall. I mean, I think we have enough textual evidence in the Bible that talks about that these were tall people, and we're told that King Og, he was of the remnant of the
Raphael.
Rephaim. Okay, he's got a really big bed. I mean, this his bed is 9 cubits long and
Yeah,
4 cubits wide. I mean, and it's made of iron. I mean, iron is really scarce back
yeah,
then. So this has got to be a big dude. I just think, why would they go to all this trouble to tell us if he was just, he was 6 feet tall? It's like, I don't know. That seems
yeah.
kind
No,
of, you know.
I'm
So
just to reiterate, I
yeah,
don't have an issue with Og being that tall. I don't.
yeah,
As
okay,
long as I remember that that's just an assumption based on what we're told about his bed, then that's fine. As long as I'm not coming across as claiming that the Bible tells me how tall he is, I'm fine with thinking that he was tall. That again, just to reiterate that, so we keep that at the forefront. Is that's my only concern? Is where are we getting these conclusions from? And if we have to speculate, then we speculate because,
sure,
frankly,
yeah,
I mean, like we said, the key portion of Genesis 6 or Numbers 13 is such a tiny amount of scripture that it really forces us to do a lot of thinking and comparing scripture with scripture. And yeah, in the end, we end up having to do systematic theology where you're really trying to meld things together like a jigsaw puzzle.
sure,
And some of the pieces might not quite fit, and we have to speculate between this piece and that piece. And that's fine with me as long as I know where I'm speculating and where I'm not.
right. Yeah, fair enough.
I'm
Fair
good
enough.
with
I appreciate your candor and I appreciate your reservation to jump too far in any direction.
yeah,
That's what a good researcher should do.
yeah, and in turn, like I said, I'm really pleased to have you challenge me on any of these issues because it makes me either recognize I have a strong view or I don't, or maybe there's something else I need to consider. I mean, this is what it's all about to me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I find it very interesting though that there really was a movement away from this angelic view, which, according to William Winston, who was the translator of Josephus, he said that was the constant opinion of antiquity. I mean,
Yes.
there was nobody, at least before Pseudo Philo, there was nobody that had an alternative view. They all believed unanimously that fallen angels came down. They had relations with women, and out come these hybrid kids, and so
Yeah.
whether they were tall or not is another matter. But
Right. Right. Just to,
clearly, you have this mingling of these two different species.
so let me reinforce what you're saying, okay? Which is basically that the ancient view was angel majority view. And we're talking Jews, we're talking Christians, and we're talking about scholars dealing with Aramaic, with Greek, and with Hebrew. So, I mean, that is just a wide swath of information. Regardless of the language, regardless of their faith, they're looking at this text for hundreds of years, and they're all agreeing, at least on the basic point.
Right.
So, like I
Now,
told you, yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
Well, you were telling me before we got started here that you have a friend that says that the majority is not always right, but I mean, here you have, like you said, you've got scholars. I mean, obviously Josephus, he's a scholar. I mean, he's fluent in Hebrew, he's fluent in Greek, he's closer, in time to a lot of things than we are, of course. And he himself claims that you still can find the remains of giants, whatever they were, or however tall they were, to this day. And he says that they were very strange looking, right? They were not like an average man, but they had a very peculiar appearance.
Yeah, fierce countenance.
Right, right. So okay, so tell me about your friend that's, thinking, bah humbug, this is all a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, that could lead me into part of a discussion about my view of angels. So basically, right, my friend says, well, majority isn't always right, and I completely agree with that, but it is a simple historical fact. Okay, at this point, Doug and I are not offering our opinions. It is just a simple fact of history that is the case. So one thing my friend says, well, I don't believe that angels can create life, only God can do that. But Doug, don't you and I both have kids?
We do. Yes, we do. Yes.
So the issue is not that we or angels would have the same kind of creative prerogative that God does, but that well, I know how I created my kids, and we can talk about how the angels might have done it if you want to go there.
Well, I think we all know the
I'm
basic
not just
kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
but okay, I'm mentioning that because I have people constantly telling me, well, angels are spirit, so there's no way a spirit could do that with a human, with a physical human woman, and that's where my view of angels, um, part of what it needs to address is how that can happen.
Okay, let's go there. Tell us what you think.
Okay, now again, it's kind of frustrating, I know, for Doug and myself. Sometimes we'll speak a sentence and there's like literally maybe years, hours worth of thinking and reading and pondering behind it, so that I could give you detail that would just bore you to death behind any one claim that I'm about to make. You know what that's like, Doug.
Yes,
But
I do.
basically, okay, so we look at the Bible, look at every single text that actually gives you a physical description of an angel, and it actually does give you a physical description of an angel. So that should tell you something. And all of them look like human males, period. Okay, no wings, no halos, nothing different or weird, exactly like a human male. Now, I know as soon as I say no wings, people are thinking, well, what about cherubim and seraphim? Okay, going back to the thing I said about common knowledge, it is common knowledge that angels, malachim, seraphim and cherubim, these are all different kinds of angels. But I would like to see even a single text in the entire Bible that would lead me to that conclusion. So my view is, no, they are not different kinds of angels. Angels, seraphim, and cherubim, they have different titles, they have different job functions, and they all look different from each other. So they are different categories of being, right? So for instance, there's human beings and there's bovines. We're both earth dwellers, but we're different categories of being. So that angels are one thing, cherubim a different thing, seraphim a different thing. Okay, so now, in my view, angels are not spirit. And again, I would just ask anybody to show me any text anywhere in the whole Bible that leads me to believe that angels are spirits. And I'll give you in a minute a way that you might be able to get me on that.
Okay.
Because
Well,
there's a song.
maybe you should go back to something even more fundamental. What is spirit? Maybe that's where we ought to begin.
Okay. The way that I think about it is I go back to when Adam was created.
Mhm.
Okay, God breathed into the form he had made the spirit of
Mhm.
life,
Okay.
and it became a living soul, right?
Mhm.
So the way I like to think about it is like a computer. Okay, you have the hardware, you have the software. Our physical
Mhm.
bodies are the hardware. Our spirit, actually, our soul is the software. The
Okay.
spirit is the spirit is the electricity, right? That makes everything come together and work together.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make kind of sense?
Yeah.
Because
So are you making a
let's say
distinction
you
between a neshama and a ruach? Is that kind of where you're going with this, or I'm just trying to follow?
yes,
Okay. So the neshama being what we'd probably call in English or Greek would be the soul
yes,
versus the ruach, which is the spirit. And exactly the
correct.
difference between those is sometimes a little challenging to articulate, but
Yes,
yeah,
I grant you it is right. In my
yeah.
mind, that's the way it made sense. Is the
Okay.
body is the hardware, the soul is the software, and the spirit is the electricity. That's the best I can do for you.
Okay. Okay. I mean, because we do have a
It's kind of
text.
like
Yeah. I was gonna say we do have a text in Psalm 104, right? I mean, it just comes out, says it. Who makes his angels, who malachav, or say malachav ruchot. Okay, so who makes his angels spirits?
and
So
his hold on,
yeah.
and his misters of flames of fire.
Okay. Yep. Right.
Okay. I was just going to quote that because that is the one and only possible text anybody could point to.
Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
we both know that in both Greek and Hebrew,
Uh-huh.
there's a direct correlation between the terms for spirit and the terms for wind or breath,
Okay. Sure. Yes.
right?
Okay.
So then
Mhm.
that's fine. Okay, he makes his angels spirits, and then he makes his ministers a fuel source mixed with oxygen, mixed with a spark, because that's fire, right?
Well, something burning. It's certainly that, whether they have a
Right.
spark or not, but something that's on fire. Just like we
So
have in Ezekiel chapter 1, right? We have the kruvim there that they're on fire, right? So interesting. This is fun.
well,
I'm
yeah.
enjoying this stuff. Yeah.
So I'll just give you. Okay, so what I would say is obviously it's a psalm. So we first need to consider the genre and consider if maybe that it's being poetic or not,
Okay.
because obviously it's a psalm. We are forced to take the genre for what it is.
Okay.
The way that I've come to think of it is that in John 3, right, Jesus is speaking to Nicodemus, and he says, "The wind bloweth where it listeth, and thou hearest the sound thereof, but cannot tell whence it comes, whither it goeth. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit." Okay, so in my mind, that's really what the psalm is telling us: is God sends out His angels, and they're very much like wind. They're out performing the task God gave them to do, right? Like the same with a flame of fire. The flame of fire is just going in every which direction. It's doing what it has to do.
Hmm.
So he makes his angels to go about doing what they need to do with the swiftness of wind. It goes where it wills, and that's what it's like for everyone born of the Spirit. That's just the way I've been able to understand it. And there is the hermeneutical issue that you do not want to build an entire doctrine on one single verse.
Sure. It's interesting. I would actually go just the opposite direction. I would say that the neshama is more of the earthly terrestrial thing because even animals have a neshama. All right, whatever that may be exactly. I would call it the basic, well, kind of the breath in your lungs, that sort of biological breath, if you will, and the ruach I would see as just a different kind of Lego. That's how I think of it. That angels are very corporeal. All right, they're very corporeal because they have bodies. We see that,
Thank
but
you.
but they're
Yes.
not they're not limited in the ways
No.
that we're limited.
Yes.
But
Thank
they
you.
definitely have a, let's call it a physical, not an earthly, but a physical, tangible, touchable form. When they want to, they can also. It also seems that they can transform themselves uh, at will, which we don't fully understand, but that seems to be the case. I mean,
Okay.
there's a lot of question marks when it comes to angels. There's no
Yeah.
questions,
Well,
no question about that.
I can barely stop myself from interrupting you because I'm so excited, because that is my view. The way that I would express it is that yes, angels are quote unquote physical, and what it seems to me is that they have unfallen bodies, unfallen, still glorified physical bodies, meaning that they can choose when to interact with a certain dimension or not. So if they want to be invisible, boom, they could just shift out of that dimension. It doesn't mean they're not physical. So the way I think of angels is they are as physical as Jesus was post resurrection,
Mhm.
where he can be touched, he can eat, but he can also walk through a closed door,
Yes.
right? And when you think of angels in those terms, then you can see how they can get married with women and do what they did. It's literally a physical act.
Yeah. They can essentially, I think the technical term is transmogrify, that they can, they can kind of flip the switch however they do that, and they can be visible, tangible in this dimension, and then they can somehow morph into another dimension that's beyond our comprehension at this point.
Right.
Um,
I mean, if you were
yeah.
to, for whatever reason, maybe you want to take a swing at an angel. So you're throwing a punch at an angel, and he can just stop interacting with the dimension of depth. He can become flat as a pancake. Your punch goes right through, and then you know what I mean. That's what we're talking about. That's what it seems like to me. Now, I did start wondering about, well, maybe they look really different and strange because one of the things they generally first say to a person is fear not. But then I looked up every single text where an angel says that, and it seemed to me the kind of case where, like, let's say right now I'm in my room alone and I know that, but what if I turn around and somebody's standing there? Oh, I'm going to have a jolt, and they're going to say, "Whoa, whoa, chill out, man," And
Mm.
when you read every text where an angel says that, that is the kind of situation it is. Like Mary alone in her room, and all of a sudden there's an angel,
But they do seem
or
to
the
have
priest.
some kind of a glow. There's some illumination. I mean, on the one hand, they're sometimes called astrapsis, which is that they're shining. Okay, so that's one consideration. Then we're also told, Daniel's told that we will shine like the angels, or excuse me, Jesus says that in Matthew 13. Um, so there's some kind of a shining quality.
There is something, because you're right. Because, for instance, Stephen, the first martyr, his face looked like the face of an angel. Well, what are you talking about if they look like human males? There was just some certain quality about him that reflected something that was known about angels. Yeah, I would say that they look like us, but there's definitely something about a glorified body that would make it that much more vivid or something like that.
Yeah, and let me just offer this because I think this is equally important. What does God look like? And I think this is one of those topics where we've been told, oh, God is spirit, so he doesn't have any form and anything like that. But man, when you go through the text, you don't see that. You see in Ezekiel chapter 1, there was someone who looked like Adam. Okay, it says, came out Ma'e Adam. He had the appearance of Adam on the throne. And then Ezekiel falls on his face, of course. When God calls Miriam and Aaron into his office and says, "Hey, what are you talking smack about Moses for?" He sees the form of the Lord, which is the word tmuna, which in Hebrew the tmuna is a picture. Okay, just like you might in modern Hebrew take a photo, and and the list goes on. I mean, there's all these places where we see what God looks like. Daniel chapter 7, there's the Ancient of Days, and he's got a particular form. And it's not Jesus, because here comes the Son of Man, flying in, and the Ancient of Days. We know his general form is a human form, which should not be a surprise to us because, my goodness, we were made in his image and in his
Right.
likeness, right? So we shouldn't be too surprised by this. And I think that the angels have that same general shape that we do, okay, because we all have the God shape. I think the angels have the God shape. And of course, God is infinitely greater than any of us, no question about that. But we're the little guys on the totem pole here. But angels have that same general shape, and I agree with you that the Kruvim and the Seraphim, which I think might actually be the same thing, but that's another discussion. But they seem to have a different kind of shape, because
Yes.
then even in Ezekiel chapter 1, it talks about the wheel inside of a wheel, which sounds like some kind of a gyroscope, and there's eyes all around it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really weird looking creature,
Well, yeah,
whatever
right.
that may be.
Yeah, the
But those are
Ophanim.
also called the Kruvim. So they seem to
Although
be a
those are,
different
well,
class. Yeah,
yeah, the wheels are the Ophanim.
that's true. The Ophanim.
And the
Yeah.
oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm just getting so excited about this discussion. It's just I absolutely love what we're doing here. I mean, my brain's going in all these directions. I'm like, oh, wait, Doug, oh, wait, what about this? Okay, so sorry, I'm cutting you off again. I'm just so excited.
No, it's cool. Well, I mean, it says that they look. I mean, it says that the Kruvim were actually the Ophanaim. So, and they had eyes all around. These wheels
Right.
seem to have eyes. I mean, it is kind of a weird
Yes.
text, there's no question. But, and they seem to be under the throne of God. So I'm like thinking like a gyroscope type thing, which is the actual cherub. And then they seem to kind of be like the power sources for God's throne. So he's got like
Right.
this portable throne. He like flies around or something, and of course he's all fiery, and then you got angels, or the malachim, whatever term we want to use here. What really the most general term is bnei Elohim, of course, is the sons of God.
Yes.
And well, a son of God, I mean, he probably looks kind of like God to some extent. I mean, um, that shouldn't be too surprising. And that's how they always show up. So I think we all have the same basic shape, and we've kind of lost our glow. Before Adam fell, I think he had a glow as well, but he kind of lost that. So
Well, even okay, seraphim. Okay, we only have one single text that talks about them, so it's a little difficult. But we're not told what their bodies look like, and it's almost like we have to just assume that they're just a regular looking body except for 6 wings. And unfortunately, Ezekiel makes me upset because he uses the word like a lot,
mm.
because
he
he's
was
forced to. I mean,
he was
obviously.
well, he
But
was from
it's like,
California, wasn't he? Like.
like, dude, it was like, yeah. But he says, they have like something like a man's hand under the wing. So is it that they have arms under the wing, or is it some kind of prehensile appendage that's like our hands? I don't really know. And then when you talk about cherubim, also their actual bodies aren't described all that well, except that they have 4 faces, 4 wings, and hoof-like feet. So you would almost think maybe that's implying the same thing, that the basic form of the body is the same. So let me run a couple things by you here. Okay, the issue of going back to Genesis 6, you'll note that there's no indication Satan was involved in that whatsoever. Would you agree with that?
In Genesis 6.
Yeah.
I sort of see him as the mastermind way behind the whole thing, but
Thank you.
he was
Yes.
not, yeah, he was
You
not
know,
directly, you know.
you know what? When you research your Satanology, Satan hardly ever actually does anything.
It's because he's
He's like,
smarter. He's the Godfather.
yeah,
He's like, I did
you
nothing.
know,
I did nothing. You can't touch me. You
yeah,
got no dirt on me.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
said, hey, what do you think about doing that? Or
Oh,
why don't you guys go down there and
yeah,
see what those women are like? See what happens.
exactly. Yes. I mean, he's like, if you're standing next to him and they ask for a volunteer, he'll take a step back to make it look like you took a step forward.
Hmm.
Or I was correlating to my friend the other day the Mark Twain story with the little boy painting the fence, and it's really a drag. He doesn't want to do it, but he gets the other kids to not only paint the fence for him, but pay him to paint the fence for him. That's what's exactly what Satan's like. He's
Yeah.
always getting other people to do. Think about Revelation, okay? Where is Satan in Revelation? He's barely doing anything. He's just, like you said, the puppet master. He's the Wizard of Oz behind the screen. The beasts are up front. The false prophet is up front. All these other characters are up front. Satan's in the background, like, hey man, don't point your. Anyhow, that's yes. So
Yeah, I totally
Satan
agree.
is not.
Yeah.
He's not directly involved in Genesis 6, and I think that part of it might be the fact that Satan is not a fallen angel, right? Satan is a fallen cherub. And so it might just be that he doesn't have the necessary, shall we
Hardware.
say, physical anatomy that would have him involved in that. And the fact that he wasn't involved in it means that's why the fallen angels are incarcerated, whereas he still roams about like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. So now, let me tell you something. When you get deep into these topics, it's funny. I find myself racking my brain for days on end about something that other people care less about. I mean, I know you know what that's like.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm thinking about. We're told that Satan entered Judas, right? The one and only time in the whole Bible where Satan enters somebody. You know that was momentous, no question about it, and we know why, obviously. But I'm thinking, how on earth? Well, let me take a step back. So, just like we talked about angels being physical, but being able to traverse dimensions, I think the same exact way about cherubim and seraphim. Okay? So, now, how can a cherub enter a person? How could that possibly happen? And I'm racking my brain about it. Like I said, who else cares about him? It says he did it, let's move on. But then when you think about Ezekiel, the text you were just talking about, it specifically tells us that the spirit of the cherubim were in the Ophanim.
Mm. Yes.
Okay, and that to me, I was like, finally,
Uh-huh.
that makes me. You see, when I understand that Satan is a cherub, and then I understand that one of the capabilities of a cherub is to have their spirit enter into something else. There's the answer for me.
Hmm.
There's the answer. That to me was very satisfying to be able to put all these crazy, wild, and apparently disjointed pieces together like that. But it's only
That's yeah.
because we're
That's
sticking
interesting.
as close to the text as we possibly can and not playing around with, yeah, he's a cherub, but that's just a kind of angel, so let's move on. No. Let's look at it as precisely as we can. So then when we are forced to speculate, we're speculating close to the hub, right?
Yeah,
Close to the actual core. Yeah.
that's right. Now, do you think that the demons are the same as fallen angels, or do you see a distinction there?
Well, okay. I think that I invented a brand new theory on this, and that worries me.
Okay, that's all right.
Believe me,
We're all
I
we're
had a
all
discussion.
heretics. It doesn't really matter. We're all heretics at heart. So
We're all a little heretical, yeah. Because
that's
I
right.
mean, I remember I talked to my pastor at one point and said, you know, I'm not the kind of guy that makes to say something wild just because it'll sort of make me stand out or put my name on any kind of map. I don't want that kind of attention. If I'm making something up that seems to be new or different, well, I really want it to be correct because I'm just interested in understanding the text as much as I can. So I'll give you my view if you want.
Please.
Now, um, I do have a book I haven't published yet that deals with every single one of these topics in extreme detail, just so you know. So, what I'm about to tell you, I think it took me about 6 pages to actually type it out in detail with the quotations and the citations of saying, for more on this point, go read the other chapter, but let me progress. And so, again, extremely detailed. But for me, the bottom line is the angels fall. Okay, they're physical beings. They're incarcerated physically in what Peter ends up referring to as Tartarus. And for those who don't know, Tartarus, it's not that sauce that you eat with fish, you know. Bada boom. So what made sense to me, again, for very detailed reasons I probably couldn't get into without due to the time constraints, but I wrote it all out and it'll be published at some point. Okay, so the physical bodies get locked up in Tartarus, but their spirits or their souls are left to roam the earth, and those are the demons. Okay, and that might go part of the way as to explaining why they seek um, possession, embodiment, right? They want to regain that which they once had. Also, they are terrified to be sent into the abyss or the
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 bore.
abuso, the bottomless pit, they do not want to be sent to where their bodies are, because then that would mean they re-inhabit their bodies, and then what? Then they're locked up doing hard time, right? Then they're stuck basically until, well, to me, it's until Revelation 9 when they're released. But that's to me why they're terrified. It's not, we know that they're not instantly destroyed or sent to hell or whatever. To me, they're terrified of being re-inhabiting their bodies, and then they're stuck down there, getting in fights in the exercise yard. And
Now, so do you think that all of the fallen angels were sent to Tartarus, or just some of them?
all of them.
Okay.
I think all the fallen angels were incarcerated and no more angels fell. It was a one-time deal. In fact, I believe that there's some metaphorical texts in Ezekiel about a tree, the one about the tree and the
The eagle, is
it
that right?
sounds like a song from the band Rush, you know what I mean? Sorry,
Yeah.
it's getting
No,
late in my mind going
I'm trying
places.
to I'm trying to think what that would be, but
Yeah, to
yeah.
me, there's a text that implies that the other angels saw what happened and they were like, "Oh no, we are not doing this. Nope,
Okay.
no problem. There's no way we're doing anything like that."
So you
And
you
that's
wouldn't
why.
take it, you wouldn't take any cues from the book of Enoch that says it was 200 angels. You
Well,
think
that's
that?
a different issue. I mean,
Okay.
what Enoch is doing is telling us how many fell
Hmm.
during that event. It doesn't tell us whether they kept doing it throughout the even post flood or even nowadays. And in fact, that was one of my points is if Jude and Peter are not talking about Genesis 6 as referring to a fall of angels, then what on earth are they talking about?
Well,
Because you
I
don't
could,
have
yeah,
any kind of thing anywhere else in the Bible, anywhere.
I completely agree with you that Jude and Peter are talking about the angels. In my opinion, it was just talking about the angels who did not keep their proper domain. So it,
Yes.
it doesn't necessarily mean it's all of the bad angels or fallen angels, but it's just this particular group who did this. I mean, the way that I see it is you had, I mean, a few hundred. I don't know if we kind of go with Enoch or whatever, but it wasn't the whole kit and caboodle, because then we see that Satan still has angels in Revelation chapter 12, right? So there's still angels at his disposal to do all kinds of his dirty work.
Yeah.
And if you look at Philo equates angel and daemonia as one and the same thing. Daemonia just meaning a mighty one, right? That's all the word means. Um, and so that's kind of my take on it. That fallen angel, daemonia are the same thing, and it wasn't all of them that got thrown into the abyss. It was just a certain amount, because they were the ones that were the avant-gardes, if you will, to go and give this thing a try. So
So I just want to clarify something. When we talk about Jude and Second Peter, it is another issue of that they're making a certain reference, and then the angel issue is a subtext to it. I just want to make absolutely clear that the audience understands. It's not like Jude and Peter sat down and they said, "Oh yeah, let's write a commentary of Genesis 6," because
okay.
what they're dealing with is false teachers and false
Hmm.
prophets.
Hmm.
Right? That's their primary concern. Then, as a subtext, they throw in the issue about the fallen angels. Okay, so that again,
Sure.
I just get really technical about this stuff. But what
Yeah.
you do find in Peter and Jude is they're virtually giving you a timeline of events, because they talk about the fallen angels, and then they'll talk about the flood, and then they'll talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. And so you see they're going down the line, and they're definitely starting with something pre-flood.
Hmm.
And again, to me, that is the Genesis 6 event, because there's no other indication in Scripture that angels fall. Now, yes, the Revelation 12 thing is fascinating, and to me, it is so difficult in my mind to put Revelation into any kind of chronology. But I would say that one reason that that chapter is just fascinating is because, for example, um, you have it. I'm pulling it up right now because I want to read one sentence from it. She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Now, Doug, you know what happened there? I just read you 30 years worth of history.
That's right.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus is born and he ascends. There you go. In one single verse, 3 decades go by. And that just shows you how difficult it is to really pinpoint timelines. That to me is fascinating. 3 decades go by in just a single line.
Yeah.
So what happens is it is after the ascension that you have the great war in heaven. Okay, and that's all I can say about it. Other people you can talk to about exactly when, I don't know. I just know it was after the ascension.
Fair
So
enough.
in my mind, what happens is this. Revelation 9, the bottomless pit, the abuso, right? The abyss is opened up. The angel, the demons, they get sucked right back into their bodies and they come out as their former selves, inhabiting their angelic bodies. They come out and they wreak havoc upon the earth, right? In Revelation 9. Now, what happens to them? What do they do afterwards? We're not told.
That's
So
true.
that in my mind, what made sense is we actually are told. Revelation 12, with those angels who were released from the bottomless pit, what they do then at some point, don't ask me when, but at some point what they do is they join Satan in this war in heaven. If I'm being told that they were incarcerated, then I'm told that they were released, and then I'm told that they fight a war, to me it's like, well, why not put all those things together? I just can't figure out a different way of doing it. And then there is the issue that there is a difference in my mind between falling and being cast out. To me, those are 2 different things. So like falling basically is being fired from your job, right? Satan is the loyal cherub, the throne guardian, and then he gets fired from his job, and then he's made to roam about the earth. Now he's fallen. But then when he's cast, okay, and then what it means is he has to continuously keep coming before the Lord to make his accusations, to report about what he's up to get permission, all these things that he's doing. But when he's cast out, that means that's it. Now you're out of heaven for good. You do not get to come up before the Lord anymore. You're stuck on earth, and that's why he gets really upset at that point. Same with the angels. They're released out of the pit. They wreak havoc upon the earth. They go to fight against Michael and his angels. They lose the war, and they're cast out of heaven. That's it. Now you're locked out for good.
That makes a lot of sense.
By the way, that also made sense to me, because if you read all of Revelation, the one thing that struck me is an absence of demons. You have one weird reference about demons like frogs coming out of mouths. To me, it's very highly symbolic, so I'm not sure to make out of that. And then you have almost like a generic reference about how Babylon will be the place for unclean birds and demons. But you do not actually see demons running all over the place doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And in my mind, it's because the demons are not running around anymore. They re-inhabited their angelic bodies, and that's how they're active.
Interesting. I would have a slightly different perspective. I don't think that all the angels were put into the abyss. I think it was just just maybe 200 or whatever. And the other ones are behind the veil, that they can hide themselves, and they're not actually able to transmogrify or to take a physical form on a regular basis. They can do that on occasion when there's some kind of a blood sacrifice, or full moon or whatever. They can possibly incarnate, if you will, under certain circumstances. But most of the time, they are stuck behind this veil. So in other words, they're invisible. And then when they lose the battle in heaven, that's when they're sort of push through the veil and they can no longer go back. They go through the force field and it's a one-way street, okay, and they can't go back. We kind of have a similar scenario because we
Yeah,
end up
yeah,
kind of at the same place, but that's
right.
just a little tweak I'd throw in there.
It is,
So
because really the only difference with what I said is I would call those demons and you call them fallen angels who have not been incarcerated. Other than that, it's the same kind of scenario.
right, yeah. That's awesome, man. You've done some excellent research, and I just want to
Likewise, that
encourage well, thank you. I want to encourage everyone to get your book. You guys, you can go to Amazon.com, and there Ken has just a lot of books. I mean, he's done a lot of good work here. So I think you'll be very interested to see what he has. You can follow him there, and of course, you can get this latest book on the Nephilim. This is again called the Genesis 6 Affairs, Sons of God, Angels or Not. Okay, so go ahead and check that out, and I'll put that in the description here of the video. So make sure to take a look at that, get the book. And Ken, I just want to thank you again for coming on the show. We kind of ran over, but it was definitely fun to do so. And you gave us a lot to think about. And really, again, I appreciate your methodical research, appreciate your caution in the research, and to not go beyond what the text says. Even though we may disagree on how tall those Nephilim were, but that's okay because I appreciate that because it's so easy to get into left field and we start making big
sure.
speculations that just we can't really make a case. You know, we can say, well, I think maybe this is what happened. Okay, fine. But as far as sort of being dogmatic about it and saying, no, this is the truth, if the text doesn't say it, then we don't know it. And boy, I could go on all kinds of other topics on that statement right there. But if the text doesn't say it, then we don't know it. And if the text does say it, then we go with it. That's kind of the bottom line. And you have definitely stayed true to that principle. So thank you for educating us. And everyone, go and check out Ken Ami's books there on Amazon, and also check out your website. Tell us your website one more time, Ken.
Sure. And then I'd just like to make a short statement. The website is
Absolutely.
truefreethinker.com, one word, truefreethinker. Now, I appreciate you and your research as well. I mean, when you invited me to do this show, in my mind, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, good, just another platform for me. But it was like, Doug Hamp, okay, this is a guy who will actually get what I'm talking about. And that's why it was so great to have this discussion. Well, I was so excited, I could barely stop from interrupting you. This is exactly what I thought would happen, and I'm so pleased for it. Also, I want to point out to the people interacting in the chat section, sorry. You can tell we just got so excited. We can't even stop talking now. I appreciate your thoughts and your comments, and I do apologize we didn't get to them, but we can't stop running our mouths.
And for those that we didn't get to too many questions, but they can also put those in the comment section of the video after it kind of renders for a few minutes here. I put those comments in the section there, and then I look at the videos. I'm sure Ken will look at it as well, and we'll try to answer your questions there. So
I'm going camping all weekend, but I will definitely make it a point to get in there next week.
Very cool. Very
I
cool.
appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And just everyone stay in the Word. Again, if it's not in the text, you don't have a doctrine. If it is in the text, then go with it. Discuss it, research it, and you'll find just amazing things. So God bless you until next time. Bye-bye.
Shalom.